Can rising insurance costs for your home keep you from affording your house or buying a house? Well, in today's video, Eric and I are going to cover some things you should keep in mind. 5 things that could affect your homeowner's insurance and your ability to afford a home.
All right, so if this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in the greater Portland metro area, be sure to click that subscribe button, tap that notification bell, do a little dance, and you will be the first to know about everything happening in our market.
I'm Ann Stewart, this is Erica Hagfirst, and we are your go-to gals if you're planning on making any kind of move in and around Portland. All of our contact information is in our description below. Call us, text us, email us. We use all formats of communication so that we can communicate with people like you who are thinking about making the move to the Portland metro area. So have you noticed or heard the headlines that insurance costs for homeowners has been going up? Yeah. Certainly in many parts of the country that have big natural disasters, we're seeing lots of headline news in this department. Did you know that there were over 66 weather-related calamities totaling over $1 billion each? And you know, these insurance companies just can't keep up with that, and so changes have been going on and are still on the horizon. Imagine a house that is insured for, say, $1 million, but by the time that house needs to be rebuilt through an insurance claim, it actually costs that insurance company closer to $2 million with all the costs of the build. Yep. Inflation, everyone, can happen even in situations like that. So as you can tell, a lot of these homeowners insurance companies are either getting out of the area like we see in California
we're out of here,
and Texas and Florida, or they're saying, you know what, in order to get that same insurance plan on your property, it's going to be a whole heck of a lot more.
Yeah.
Now, we live and work in the Portland metro area, so how does this even affect us? Well, guess what? We are seeing some things in that realm as well, because I think it's filtering out to all the other states because insurance companies are covering their butts.
Yeah, they got to make some money somewhere, and it's going out to all of their insured.
And even though we don't have a ton of natural disasters like hurricanes, tornadoes, we still have a few events per year that can cost a lot for these insurance companies, and they're going to go ahead and, you know, change their plans according to that. So let's get into what we're seeing and what you should be aware of when you're going to buy a house, or even maybe you own a house and you're like, hey, I noticed something's changing on my insurance policy.
Yep. All right, so the first thing to think about is the history of the home. Now, it may not seem like that should be a big deal. You're going to do your inspections when you purchase a home and understand the current condition. However, what we're starting to see is that there is a report called the Clue Report. And that report is now getting pulled with homes, and it shows the history of any insurance claims that home has had. And that is becoming a bigger factor in what your rate is going to be as the new owner of these homes.
It's kind of like Carfax. Like when you go to buy a car, you can actually know if it's been in an accident.
Well, this is the same thing for your home. It is the history of any big insurance claims, well, any insurance claims for that matter, that the home has had and what the results were. And it does kind of ding your home. You generally have a higher interest rate or insurance rate going forward because there's been some things wrong with that house. And you just recently had a really interesting thing happen with a Clue Report on a home that you guys were selling.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, so 2 properties we recently put under contract. The buyers had their insurance agents, you know, give them a quote, right? You go to buy a house, they give you numbers, they tell you, hey, this is how much your insurance is going to cost you. Well, those insurance agents ran the Clue Report to find out if there had been any claims on the house, because they were going to make an estimate based on that. And I got a phone call in both cases within 1 week of each other that said, hey, your owner had a claim that we didn't know about. And the downer was it costed the buyer more money to get insurance on that same property, even though it could have been a simple accident or whatnot.
Well, and the items were fixed.
The items were fixed, that's right.
There was no residual left over in these homes from the incident, from the insurance claim.
Yep.
In
both cases,
situations, they were fixed.
And they were right around $30,000 to $35,000 worth of, and they were like a leak. You know, that's really standard. Leaks happen.
Water is your worst enemy.
It's your worst enemy, but unfortunately, and they fixed everything. Everything was great, but it ended up being that the They found out about it, and it costed them more money to get insurance on the house. So it's just one of those things where that may come up when you go to look into buying, and it could affect your cost of insurance.
And I've been hearing that the clue reports they're supposed to be pulled, but they're getting pulled more often. And so it's just something to think about, and maybe that becomes a question that you ask during the purchasing process or offer making process, is have there been any insurance claims on this house with the current owner? Just to have a full knowledge of how that may affect you going forward with your insurance. I mean, we're finding, I think, base insurance is really just going up, but you want to have a ballpark for where you're going to be with that, because it can affect your monthly in some cases.
All right, number 2 is the condition of the home. This is huge. Listen up, because these insurance agents are doing questionnaires to the buyers saying, how old is the home? How old is the systems of the home? Roof, water heater, furnace, and guess what? They're even asking about electrical and plumbing. So we ran into a scenario a little over a year ago with a house we sold that was built over 100 years ago. And over 100 years ago, they used the knob and tube. And knob and tube is kind of cool when you run across it, honestly, because it was the very first type of electricity any house could ever get in a house. But it's not cool in 2024. In 2024,
cool.
No. And in this particular case, the seller had actually updated most of the electrical, but there was still some knob and tube being used in this one area of the house that seemed pretty harmless, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the insurance company was kind of freaking out because they see that as a huge safety fire hazard. And we ended up negotiating where the buyer got a credit to have it replaced within 90 days of closing. So they wanted that stuff out, not being used at all.
Yeah. And we're finding this more and more often. It's getting harder and harder to get knob and tube. If you find that in your home during a home inspection, which we love our old Portland, bungalows and Craftsmans and all of that, but you really do need them updated. And if there is knob and tube, especially if there's insulation around it, man, big red flag. You need to get that addressed. So, you may have to have it addressed just to get insurance.
Yeah. But especially if it's all over. Like in this case, it was a small amount, but if you have the whole entire house still on it, that's a problem. The other thing is roofs. Like we're starting to see them focus on that roof better have some life in it.
Well, and you better only have one layer, maybe two.
Yeah.
Because that is something that some people will do, is they'll put multiple layers of roofs on. It's a cheaper way to replace your roof.
Yeah.
But it's not great. It adds a lot of weight to the structure. And then you think about, the few things that we do have here in the Northwest are kind of, like we could have snow, and that adds a lot of weight to your home as well. And we see issues arise from that. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but all of these things are starting to come into play. And even the condition of, say, the vegetation around your home. Yeah. That's a big one. And so,
tell about your story. This is crazy.
I had some lovely buyers last year who bought a house and it had some apple trees around it. I mean, it was a really cool little urban oasis with lots of foliage around the home. And they got their insurance, and about 30 days after moving in, they got a notice
after closing,
getting their policy in place, because the insurance company wanted to see photos of the house. They wanted to see condition of the house. They got a notice that if they didn't trim back all the foliage around the home, their insurance policy was going to get canceled.
Dropped them because of foliage.
Yeah, we're talking, I mean, it wasn't anything crazy. I mean, and they were in the city. This was not like a high fire danger area. This was like in Southeast Portland, and they have some fruit trees around their house that are, touching. And so that just goes to speak to, insurance companies want to be a little bit more careful as to what they're insuring. And they're going to make sure that the condition of the house and the way that you're, maintaining it is in line with what their expectations are to have the best possible outcome.
So they can now tell you what you might need to do either before closing or after closings for them to keep your policy intact. And we're hearing places out of like Florida and whatnot, they actually do like their own type of home inspection where someone physically comes out from the insurance company and does their own inspection. In fact, I was on vacation with some family members that were from Florida, and they literally had their rental property getting inspected by the insurance company, and they gave them a punch list of things they had to do to keep their policy. And I thought, oh my Lord. And then I also heard before you close escrow in Florida, they do the same thing. So,
well, and here's a personal, I think it is. Here's a personal story. So I purchased a home last year, and I was told I ended up having to send photos in of my property, all my outbuildings, all of the trees on my property, so that they could assess what any sort of risk was. Now, I am in potentially a slightly higher fire area, but they told me that if they had had a person in the area, they would have sent them out for a physical inspection. That is the new where we're at, I think, with home insurance, is that they are going to start being very careful of what they're insuring. They really want to have a true idea of what they're insuring. And, you know, this is a little bit off topic, but also to keep in mind is when you get insured, they are basically building out that policy so that when it gets rebuilt, if you have a natural disaster, they're coming in and being like, oh, well, if we have a big natural disaster and there's a whole bunch of people making claims, the cost of labor is going to go up. So you're having to cover that cost in your insurance premium. You're having to basically pay for like labor and a half of making sure so that you could get that home rebuilt if you had something happen. All right, so point number 3 or item number 3 to think about would be affordability. So there's the affordability of the initial purchase of your home insurance, really understanding how big of a policy do you need for the home that you're getting. Obviously, if you have a smaller home, it's going to be less than a bigger home. But the other thing to think about is that if you're really tight on a budget, know that your insurance premium could go up, and that at no fault of your own doing. Again, personal experience here. I'm just about ready to hit 1 year in this property, and my insurance premium renewed, and guess what? It went up. I have no claims. I have no issues. I've done nothing. And this is already after, taking into account increases for improvements that I've made to the property. So just know, just like auto insurance, if there is an area, like if your state has had a lot of claims and they are finding that they need to raise their base price, that can happen. And it can be significant. These companies, I don't think, have any maximums on how much they can raise their insurance.
It's not like property taxes where you cap out 3% a year.
So we're seeing some significant increases. I think I went up probably somewhere in the range of a couple $100s a year. But it could be more, and especially if you've had claims. You've gone through that process of having claims, and
and we'll talk about that here in a second.
It all affects you. So it's great to have. You have to have it, especially if you finance your property. It's going to be required, and you want to make sure you're the one making the decision as to who puts the insurance in place. But just know that they can raise prices just like auto insurance, and that there's no cap on how much they can increase that. So make sure that you have a little bit of comfort when it comes to your insurance premium.
All right, now number 4 is claims. I'm a big believer in carrying insurance. I know a lot of people hate to make that monthly payment, but I have had claims before, and they are not cheap. And it's really nice to get the insurance company involved so you get it done quickly and efficiently in the right way. That being said, claims will absolutely increase your insurance policy. So 2 things about that. Number 1 is take proactive measures as much as you can about preventing any kinds of claims. When you leave town to go on vacation, maybe consider turning off your water source. I have a client right now that every time they leave town, they turn off the water because they had a leak while they were out of town. And it was a very destructive process when they got back. Take precautions to put maybe a tray underneath your washing machine if it's upstairs, because one of the number 1 ways leaks happen is you have a leak in your washing machine and then it floods down into the lower level. Those are just a couple ideas, but in general, you want to take as much precautions because leaks and water are your number 1 way that you're going to have a claim on your house. Now, claims will increase your policy, and here's the thing. If you have more than 1 claim, I can almost guarantee that your insurance company is going to drop you. They're going to say, bye. And then you're going to have to go out there and surf for more insurance. And ultimately, it's going to cost you more.
And they're going to be able to see that you haven't had any claims.
That's correct. Yeah. So I had 2 claims on my current residence. And then I decided to change out the plumbing. But at the end of the day, they dropped us and we had to go find other insurance companies. And it just was really difficult. We actually had a lot of them pass us up. And then they finally took us on because we were able to actually show that we replaced all the plumbing in the house. Like, hey, we have brand new plumbing. We did the right thing. But it still was high. And so now, a lot of people look at some claims like, do you really want to file that claim? Maybe you take care of it yourself if it's under a certain dollar amount and you can handle it. Because putting a claim on the property, number 1, increases. Number 2, it stays with the house. So when I go to sell, they're going to find out about it. It's fine. We've rectified everything. We'll disclose it. but it may affect that person's ability to get the insurance that they want at a cost that they were hoping to get.
Or that works for them, that makes the house affordable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, number 5 is whether weather affects
Weather.
your policy. And, you know, places that are like having natural disasters on the regular, like the Texas and the Florida and the Californias, they have to carry additional insurance, usually riders for flooding and wind and all these other things. But here in Portland, we don't really have, knock on wood, a lot of natural disasters, but we definitely get our share of some situations that are starting to affect our insurance. And we do have a healthy little ice storm. It seems like once a year, maybe twice a year. Ice does a lot of damage because trees go down. And we had a huge ice storm earlier this year that trees were falling like crazy and knocking out power and knocking through people's houses. And we usually have a pretty good freeze a few times a year, which causes massive amounts of plumbing problems. Frozen pipes was like, we had one plumber that told us he had 300 phone calls for frozen pipes in one day. And so that causes a lot of issues. And then we have, you know,
fires.
The fire possibility.
Yeah, so fire is obviously not right generally in the greater Portland metro area, but fairly close. You know, we've got stuff that's starting to happen more often in the gorge. That can spread very quickly, southern Oregon, eastern Oregon. But, you know, in areas like I live in a very heavily treed area.
And further out.
And further out. And so, you know, it's like making sure that you have, I mean, I just helped a client, they were getting insurance on a property, and, you know, the questions of how far away is your nearest fire department, you know, and all of these other questions. And, you know, it's starting to become a much bigger deal for these insurance companies. But, you know, just understanding what are the natural things that you're going to have to address. And then, you know, condition of the home. I know we talked about this a little bit, but looking at the condition of the home when you're going through the home inspection process too, to understand, like, do you have insulation in your flooring?
Yeah.
Do you maybe need to do a little extra when it comes to winterizing your house? And if we're looking at possibly having a freezing episode, or do you need to trim some trees back from around the house if you're living a little bit further out?
Great point.
You know, and then the other, you know, issue that we run into is we have flooding. We've had some really major floods, but it doesn't take a major flood for flooding to happen in some of these more localized areas. And truly understanding now, flood insurance is not something that will, you know, is part of your basic home insurance policy. That's
unless you're in a flood zone, floodplain.
Yeah, well, you'll have to get flood insurance.
Yeah.
Like it's a separate policy that you have to have generally, especially if you're in a finance situation. So, you know, understanding what that looks like, what's that cost, what precautions can you take? Are you willing to take those on? Do you understand any additional costs that are going to be associated with that? Because, you know, water, as we always say, is like, man, it can do some real damage real quick. And I'd almost say maybe a little bit more so than fire, but, you know, this is where the insurance companies are at. You know, they've had so many people make these insurance claims, and especially when these big natural disasters happen. I mean, you think about it, $66 billion is a lot of money that they're putting out.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's aside from all the other, you know, random claims. I was talking to my insurance agent, and he said in 1 week they had $200,000 claims for just random things. And so these claims are coming in, and they're never insignificant. You know, if you're making a claim to your insurance, it's not for like minor money. So just the more that you can do to your home to make sure that it's in the best possible shape so that you're not going to get affected by cold in the winter, the fires in the summer, all of that kind of stuff are really going to start making a difference, and they may start being required.
Yeah.
You know, so just the more you can do proactively and not have to be at the mercy of the insurance company, or maybe get a benefit from the insurance company because you have proactively done these things, it's really going to start taking, I think, effect on people.
Thanks for joining us on today's video, all about the fun topic of insurance and how it can go up on you and all the things.
But it never goes down.
Never goes down. So anyway, if you have comments, if you want to drop your input on this video, we'd love to hear from you. And as always, we would love to hear from you in general. If you're thinking about making any kind of move, you've got all of our contact information below. Hit us up. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you on the next video.